30 or 40 years, there has been a structural change in the education model of Tamil Nadu. When I graduated from the Regional Engineering College, Trichy, as it was then known, I think the state of Tamil Nadu produced somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 engineers a year. In 2016, there were 240,000 registered seats in engineering, and about 160,000 of them were being filled. So in theory, we were producing 40 times as many engineers in 2 generations, basically. And I said, while that's commendable in many ways, it raises some questions and it puts a big onus of responsibility on the government. The first question it raises, who is teaching all these people? Because by the time when I was graduating, of these 4,000 people, probably 50% or 60% left the country. There was such a great demand for engineers around the world, and it's testament now if you look around at the senior Chennai and Tamil Nadu trained engineers who are in senior executive positions, not just in the tech industry but in banking and in other industries, insurance and so forth. Second question, can we really scale up that fast without deteriorating the quality of education? Or are you giving up quality for quantity? Anyway, those are questions of a more profound nature. But the imminent demand it placed on the government, which I saw instantaneously, was who is going to provide career counseling, guidance, real world connect for these students, many of them first generation, for their teachers, many of them probably not with great depth of experience because of the rapid increase in scale, and more importantly for their parents who are not graduates or have not had opportunity themselves. So these students were in an ecosystem where there was nobody to help facilitate a career progression or a path or a vision. And as the CII chairman said, their ambitions were set too low. I'll study this, then I'll get one job. Any job, maybe preferably an IT job. And that's all they knew, they just didn't know any better. So back then, as an opposition MLA, I made a request to the then Chief Minister, Ms. Jayalalitha, and I said the government should get involved in facilitating a whole lot of things. Number one, making an assessment of the economy, what kinds of jobs were there, where the growth was likely to come, what is the trajectory of both the quantity of jobs needed and the kinds of skills needed for these jobs, and the compensation levels that are likely to be obtainable for you to pursue this career. It's not rocket science. A lot of countries do this already in the Department of Commerce or Economic Development Board, but we should do something like that. Second, I said we should provide this information plus counseling to at least government school students and their parents and teachers, because that will help shape their choices and their progression. Anyway, some of it got done, some of it fell through the cracks. We have started to expand more. I'll talk about it a little bit in a minute. But these things I say from the ground up. Let me look from the top down. It is very rare to find an economy where there are lots and lots of unemployed youth. Lakhs of them, tens of lakhs of them have applied in the employment exchange of the government of Tamil Nadu, and yet many employers complain that they cannot get adequate numbers of skilled people. This we would call not only an inefficient market, but a structurally inefficient market because of the lack of information at the right decision points for the right people in the market. That's the point I was trying to make back in my main speech. What do we see instead? I used to be the minister in charge of the Tamil Nadu Public Service Commission. We announced what we call Group 4 exams. Group 4 exams are for relatively low-skilled jobs, office assistants, junior assistants, drivers, things like that. And the minimum qualification to write that exam is a 10th class pass. Now, in a society, in a country, in a state where 88% of girls and probably above the same percent of boys pass +2, where 52% or so of college-age children enroll in college. In this age, the minimum qualification is still 10th grade, 10th class. For that exam, in the announced 7,000 vacancy exam, almost 24 lakh people wrote that exam. Now it tells you what is wrong with the market. If the prospects of those 7,000 relatively low skilled, relatively low bar of qualification job attracts 24 lakh applicants under the age of 35, I think we relaxed it to 37 because of the pandemic, then it tells you how inefficient the market is for labor. I think for all these reasons, the role of ICT Academy in general and events like Bridge are vital. This is not something I talk because it's in my portfolio. This is something I observed for the first time when I was a graduate student in the United States. And I saw how integrated the demands of the economy and the curriculum and education provided in the universities were. A lot of it was actually commercial. There were research grants, there were practical training, there were actual funding of graduate students from the industries in that city, in that state. It was the invisible hand of optimization that was doing it. It wasn't a government-run program. But because industry and academia were so tightly integrated to each other, it was very rare to find a master's graduate of any top 150 or 200 university who was unemployed at the end of maybe 6 months from graduation. That's how efficient the placement rate is. And that continues today. So in some sense, that is a model that we can all emulate and learn from. How do we ensure that there is a very tight integration? There's a role for the government, there's a role for institutions like ICT Academy, there's a role for educators and the owners of educational institutions, but all of us working together have to find a way to bridge this gap. In that sense, I think these events, I was impressed at the list of people speaking and the many actual recruiters from different large companies, heads of campus hiring, heads of leadership development and so forth. I think this will be vital. I hope the audience includes a lot of faculty from institutions who can transfer this kind of perception or requirement back to the students. In the state, we do what we can. We have started to do a lot more than we used to do. We have invested much more heavily in the Skill Development Corporation, in the Women Development Corporation, in the non-Motherland scheme. And we have tied up with industry partners who help us train, as mentioned earlier, to global standards, not just to local employee standards. And I guess because of the kind of, standardization of the large tech companies. If you're certified in something by Microsoft, that's a skill that can, or a qualification that can take you anywhere around the world. But I think we also should focus a little bit on what the chairman, Shankar, said, not just as the chairman of CII, but as somebody who runs one of the more reputed educational institutions, is that we need to encourage a culture of excellence, or as Mr. Arun Jain said, a way of thinking about things rather than rote, rather than ticking the boxes, rather than meeting the basic standard. To have ambition, to want to achieve, to strive, to build a culture of excellence, of perfection, and to reduce the fear of failure. Right? And one of the best things I liked about the US economy was that failure was considered a positive in some way rather than an actual negative. In fact, Bill Gates has legendarily said when he was scaling Microsoft, he said, I need to bring in people who have been executives at failed tech firms. They know what it's like to have their back against the wall. They know how it's like to fight against the odds. Most of the people in Microsoft have only ever known monopoly or oligopoly and only good times all their lives. And so Microsoft started a certain percentage of their leadership recruiting from companies that had actually been through difficult times and people who had learned from that. We need to think like that failure is another experience, in fact quite be a unique experience. I can certainly say in my case that the 30 or 40 days between when my employer, then employer Lehman Brothers failed in the United States, and when I sold the two companies that I was running for them in India and exited with a very nice package, so it was actually a financial good for me. But that 30 or 40 days probably taught me more and has had greater value to my future career, both as a corporate executive, as a public servant, than probably any 3 years or 5 years of good growth, good times, good outcomes. So I think in particular, all of these together, this removal of market inefficiency, this perception or exposure to the culture of excellence, the vision to be the best at whatever you do, these are the building blocks of truly the human capital we need. I've said it often when I was Minister for Finance and Human Resources, I say it again, finance is a market. If you have the human capital, the finance will find you. And just as much as there's people looking for money, there's that many or more sources of money looking for good investments. I used to be an investment banker. That was our day job, was to find places to get money to work. So, human capital for the government, for the state, is much, much more important than financial capital. And in that sense, it is a more crucial building block towards a $1 trillion economy than, state spending or funds. So for all these reasons, I will commend the ICT Academy board and the management, not just for this event or this year, but what they have been able to accomplish with the vision that was then set by our leader, Kalaignar, during those times this entity was started. They have grown far beyond Tamil Nadu's borders. They have been a pioneering institution in the country. I think they have offices in multiple states, in Delhi. It just goes to show you that the right people with the right approach and the guidance of people like Mr. Lakshminarayanan, how they can fill a vacuum far beyond the scope of their original mandate or vision. During my time in this post, I hope that we will work very closely together, not in an interfering way, because one could argue that the reason they've grown this fast is because the government didn't interfere that much, but in a way that we can truly leverage all of its strengths to accelerate the human capital development and aim for our Chief Minister's goal of $1 trillion economy by 2030. So I wish all of you the very best. This is a vital conference towards that human capital development. I know that all of you will be propagation points when you go back to your respective institutions. Those of you who are here from the industry, I thank you very much for coming and helping us to set expectations and standards and feed forward into the educational institutions the kinds of things that are necessary to be successful. And I hope you all have a pleasant and useful conference. Thank you very much.